Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we take a first look at the upcoming training camp for the Eagles at the NovaCare Complex. Which players that are not going to be projected starters are Gino and I going to be most invested in over the next couple months? Plus, we're going to talk losses in Eagles history, the best and worst. Best losses? Yes, trust me, we'll get into it. Coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome into a Thursday edition of the podcast. I'm Louie DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri. We've been your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast now for the last 4 years, available on all podcast platforms in video form as well on YouTube. And we're always talking birds on Twitter. Hit us up at Locked On Birds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase LOE. Gino, we're getting into some training camp talk today, 2 weeks away from Tuesday. So it is going to be here before you know it. And of course, we've been talking for months now about the projected starters and how good this team looks on paper. But today we're going to dive into some backups, some role players that we're going to be the most invested in for one reason or another. So we're both going to give an offensive player to watch and a defensive player. Then previews, we really dive deep starting next week, just taking a look at the entirety of this roster, working on some good guests too, hopefully for the show. But that's what we're going to do today, and then talk a little bit about some losses in Eagles history. Some of the most heartbreaking for us growing up as Eagles fans, currently, over the last recent seasons when it comes to heartbreaking losses, and then some of the best losses. And I'll explain that in a little bit. But, I want to dive first into that training camp topic because again, this team looks so good when it comes to their starting 22 on both sides of the football. But you mentioned it the other day, like their sixth man and their 15th guy, to make a basketball reference, off the bench. It looks pretty good compared to other NFL rosters. Like we even talked, the topic of the show a few days ago was, what role player are we going to say, like maybe week 7 of the season, needs to be on the field more? That's going to command more snaps or touches based on their efficiency. So it might be some of the same players, but for you, like we'll start with offense. Who's one player that you're going to be maybe more invested in than most for one reason or another, following them through camp, practices, and the preseason?
I would say the one addition at wide receiver that kind of goes under the radar here, with A.J. Brown being the big name, that Zach Pascal move, where he's going to be your 4th wide receiver on this team, coming into an offense where he's very familiar with what Nick Sirianni is going to ask him to do. And what is he going to do? He's going to be asked to be a possession-style receiver, get in and out of his breaks rather quickly, be on good timing with Jalen Hurts, and just be a reliable weapon. Because if you go down the depth chart, they're going to have a bunch of undrafted rookies that could potentially fill into that spot. John Hightower could potentially be the 5th guy, maybe Greg Ward. You can go on, but Zach Pascal is the surefire number 4. Yeah. He's not going anywhere. There was a reason they brought him in, and there was a reason when I did my correlation between Spotify soundtracks with players, I said I only want to be with you for Zach Pascal by Hootie and the Blowfish, because who else would he rather be with than Nick Sirianni? True. And I think that when you look back at those young Eagles offenses in the past 10 years or so, that one stable guy that they had, Lou, Jason Avant, I think Zach Pascal could play a very similar role to Jason Avant.
Kind of what Greg Ward has been supposed to be the last few years, but at a way higher level.
Absolutely. I would say at a way higher level. I think he's going to give you more consistency in his route running, a better understanding of the game plan and what he's going to be asked to do.
He's just a better overall talent, too.
I agree. Yeah. I think Zach Pascal's best days came under Nick Sirianni, and I think there is something to be said about how well you play for a certain coach. Zach Pascal is that guy. I think he's going to be somebody that will be instrumental in helping the young guys continue to learn, help Devontae Smith, even help A.J. Brown find their way in that Nick Sirianni offense, where it's going to be A.J. Brown's first year. It'll be Zach Pascal's first year in Philly, but it'll be a couple years removed from the last time he played with Nick, and a lot of those similar concepts will be in play here in Philadelphia.
Every coach does this. They have one guy that was almost like a player coach for them to help them along the way to start a new regime. Chip Kelly, it was Dennis Dixon actually in 2013, your boy from Oregon. And also Doug Peterson did it with Chase Daniel. Zach Pascal, though, of all the three, is going to have a much bigger role. And I don't think Jalen Reagor's touching him at wide receiver 4. And, Quez Watkins is going to be the wide receiver 3, but Pascal will dip into his touches for sure. He's going to play this year. So that's definitely a good one. For me, it's actually your guy, one of my guys in the 2022 NFL draft, and it's quarterback Carson Strong. And not because I think he would ever take Jalen Hurts' job or be the franchise quarterback, but I'm just really fascinated by his arm talent.
We can never say never in Philadelphia.
I guess you can never say never. That's very true. But I'm not saying he's going to even be the Nick Foles of backup quarterbacks, but I think he's a much more intriguing Nate Sudfeld, if you will. Third quarterback this year to develop, and he's got more raw upside than Sudfeld did. I saw his arm live down in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl, and it's as advertised. I mean, again, the kid's got the mobility of a dump truck with the way that his legs are held together right now. But if he can stay healthy and he can progress, he could become, I think, one of the best QB2s in the NFL, Gino. And if a guy went down, like they always have in Eagles history, that's not a bad player to have with that kind of arm talent. So these weapons aren't being held back by their backup quarterback. So I'm really interested to see how he looks, how healthy he looks, how that arm looks in training camp in year 1. And I think he's going to garner keeping a spot on this 53-man roster. He's probably not going to dress all the time, but I think the Eagles are going to get back to maybe keeping 3 quarterbacks.
For how much they paid him in undrafted money, I don't see any way that he isn't on the 50.
Plus Minshew's future after this year, he's going to be somewhere else competing for a job, I'm sure.
And if not through a trade by the trade deadline, there could be a team that comes calling that say, let's look at a roster like, let's say the Giants overperform, right? And Daniel Jones takes a knock week 6, right? Not saying you would trade within your division, but there's other teams like that.
A Vikings Bridgewater thing.
There you
Bradford.
go. Yes,
you're not going to get a first-round pick for him, but
you might get a third-round pick in the middle of the season for him. Saints with the same thing with Bridgewater as well, where they traded a third for him as well. I could see something like that happening. But Carson Strong has the arm of Josh Allen, but the legs of a Galapagos turtle.
Yeah, man, that's bad.
He can't move.
If he was mobile, his arm talent's day one.
Absolutely. All day. And there's something to be said about how badly they've missed on quarterbacks in the past couple years in terms of who they drafted, i.e. Clayton Thorson. Was an absolute disaster. They made up for that by bringing in Minshew, who they should have taken with that Clayton Thorson pick. Now they have a very good number 2, if not, I would say a top 3 number 2 quarterback in the league right now in Gardner Minshew. So now Carson Strong can really do what a type of player of his caliber needs to do. It's sit and progress with those young guys. Yeah. Get a hold of the offense. Don't get forced into the action where you're seeing top-level minutes that these top 3 or 4 picks are going to get. No, he's going to be seeing reps against second and third stringers in the preseason. But that's what a player like that needs to do. See if the arm talent is there. See if he can mentally process at that level, because if not, and you don't get him those snaps and he can't remain healthy, well, then they're probably going to have to look elsewhere for another quarterback in the future. But taking this route where you're investing in somebody with high quality arm talent, like you said, a day one arm talent guy all day long, they're not a team that shies away from medicals, because if the talent is there, they'll take a risk.
It's worth a risk, man. Yeah,
especially as an undrafted free.
Undrafted, yeah. Well, you're not taking a second or third round flyer on him, but yeah, for where he was, definitely worth the risk.
Versus what you use a pick for Clayton Thorson, a 5th round pick versus $300,000 guaranteed in undrafted free agent money.
I'm excited to really see what Carson Strong does this preseason in camp. We'd like to interrupt this edition of Locked On Eagles to give a shout out to the best tasting protein bar on the planet. It's our sponsor of the day. It's Built Bar. From the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You've probably tried the amazing Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have given Coconut Brownie Chunk the puff treatment. That's right, the Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar flavor you love, and a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. I can't wait to get my hands on these. They're in the mail right now from our good friends at Built Bar. Stop drooling and listen. They're good for you. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and all delicious. Coconut Brownie Chunk Puffs are only here for a limited time, so make sure you head over to Built.com now to make sure you don't miss out. They're going fast because they taste amazing. All Built bars are made with collagen protein with your body absorbs, I should say, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. The best part about Built Puffs is, of course, they taste amazing, but you can enjoy them guilt-free because they actually are good for you, and they're a perfect treat. Perfect when you got that craving, that sweet, you need a little something sweet. You need to satisfy that tooth, that sweet tooth. You need a quick, healthy snack. They're excellent in sources of protein. Delicious coconut, rich, sweet brownie, creamy marshmallow. Stop fantasizing. Head over to Built.com today to order your box of coconut brownie chunk puffs right now. Go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, and you're going to get 15% off your order. Once again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. And then Gino on defense. Linebacker Davian Taylor for me is someone I'm going to be more invested in than most, and I just really like the way things slowed down for him in year 2 last year, and I'm really upset that he got injured because him and TJ Edwards really turned things around when, before that, who was it? Eric Wilson and Alex Singleton. It was a disastrous 1-2 punch at linebacker, and Taylor and Edwards were such an upgrade. Not that, and I just love his physical upside. It's why I understand the reach of Taylor in 2020 in the 3rd round. I'm not saying I want him to start over Kazir White or Nakobe Dean, but and it's probably unpopular because of how good TJ Edwards was last year, but I prefer Taylor to be a bigger part of this linebacker rotation, especially in passing situations as a coverage linebacker, as a blitzer. I don't know. White and Dean might be that new core, which is fine by me. Taylor hasn't been able to show he can stay healthy or consistent enough, but it would be good to keep seeing Taylor progress because who knows? What if Kazir White plays really well, but he prices himself out of Philly? He's only on a 1-year deal right now, and we know how stingy they are with linebacker contracts and draft picks. So you never know. It would just be nice to know you have another young linebacker still developing, behind those 2 starters.
Especially for the premium of a pick that you paid using a 3rd round.
Yeah, he's a 3rd round pick. Yeah.
You would like him to continue to improve. And I think we've seen marginal improvements over the past few seasons, especially in coverage. I think he got a lot better. I would say the one area he definitely needs to improve is recognizing and sticking in gaps during the run. So he's more likely going to be an off-ball type of guy during most of the season. But if he wants to see more snaps where TJ Edwards could take those away from him, it's going to be in situations where you might have to play on 1st and 2nd down and 10, where it's going to be a true rundown, and they're going to come your way. A good offensive coordinator is going to game plan against Davian Taylor in the run game. If they put out a personnel that gets that look where you might see 2 linebackers, Kazir White and Davian Taylor on the field, thinking it's a passing situation, call the audible to a rundown. You have a bigger formation on offense. If a tight end or somebody on the offensive line gets to the 2nd level, they're going to kick him out of there. But if he comes down with the ferocity and the instinctiveness, that's where he has to get better. The instinctiveness coming downhill, you have a true caliber player in there. Somebody who was super raw coming out of Colorado, where in high school, due to religious reasons, he couldn't play in most of the games. He only practiced, was very raw at Colorado, but ran track, an unbelievable athlete. And you have seen him have, I would say, open ice hockey-like hits in the open field in the
fly,
NFL.
Man.
He can absolutely lay dudes out.
Yeah. Gino, who's a defensive player for you that you're going to maybe be more invested in than most this offseason?
I've gone back and forth on this one. I think we've talked a lot about the defensive line over the last couple weeks. We've hit on the secondary a lot in terms of who's going to be taking reps in coverage for linebacker, who's going to be an outside corner, who's going to be the safeties. One player that I think I'll be more focused on when the season starts is Avonte Maddox. But one player I'm focused on right now, especially with the acquisition of Jaquiski Tart, is Marcus Epps. I want to see how Marcus Epps responds to that. They're saying, okay, Marcus, we might not 100% believe in you, but you have competition in 2 guys that also have 1-year contracts. You're the youngest guy here. We have kept you around over multiple regimes, and we believe in your skill set. But we want to see what you do with competition around. Because last year it was really Rodney and Anthony Harris's job. Right out of the gate, right? Now it's a toss-up. I do not know who the 2 starting, and they might start 3 at times. They might have 3 of those guys on the field playing in those bigger packages where they want to defend against tight ends. But if you're going to go base, 2 safeties too high, I don't know who's going to get.
It'll be an interesting bet. It would be an interesting bet.
It would be
to predict those two, because you're right. It could be Tart and Harris, the two veterans, the more experienced players. It could be Epps and Harris because of how efficient Epps was last year, even versus the other two. It could be Tart and Epps. Who knows? I mean, it's not like Anthony Harris was so incredible last year that he deserves to be the unquestioned top safety of that defense. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Safety especially, even though they brought in Jaquiski Tart, it's still the weakest link of this football team when it comes to their overall starters. But we'll take a further look at it in training camp and see how it all really does, formulate. And I think Kavon Wallace, Gino, is in there too. This kid has barely played football.
Didn't even think about that.
Right. I mean, but this was a player me and you both loved coming out of Clemson. So versatile. He was one of the most efficient slot defenders in all of college football coming out of the draft in 2020. And if he can stay healthy, who knows? He was the higher pick than Epps. I mean, this team has invested more in Kavon Wallace than the other three. So you never know. I mean, maybe Wallace, it's not like the other guys, again, like I said, are cemented into a role on this defense. It's all open for those 4. It's competition, and that's going to be exciting to watch in camp for sure. Gino, coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles, we're going to get into some of our favorite losses, which sounds weird. Again, we'll explain it on the other side. And then we're also going to get into the most heartbreaking losses of our fanhood early on in our early years as Eagles fans, and then the most recent heartbreaking L's of the last few years. That's coming up on the other side of this edition of Locked On Eagles. All right, Eagles fans, Louie DiBiase, Gino Camilleri joining you on this Thursday edition of the show. Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. All right, Gino, let's talk losses. That's everybody's favorite topic to talk about on a sports show, right? Losses are everything that you try to avoid. And so we're going to get into today the most heartbreaking losses of our fanhood early on as kids with the Eagles. And I'm probably going to age myself more than you with this one. And then I also want, and recent losses too, that had you just losing your mind right after the game, right? And then I also want to get into the best losses. So for one reason or another, these are losses that, although again, the Eagles didn't win the football game, you came out feeling good. For, again, one reason or another. It was an entertaining football game. The stakes, something happened in that football game that made you feel good long-term. Even though it was a short-term L, it was a long-term W. So I want to first get into the heartbreakers, right? And young Gino Camilleri, growing up in the early 2000s, there's a lot of popular losses I'm sure most Eagles fans will throw in there. But for you, and again, it can be for any reason. Mine is very different than most. What is the loss you just... maybe even to this day, it bothers you that you could just not get over?
2004, January 18th, Carolina Panthers, Philadelphia Eagles NFC Championship game. And why is that? It wasn't the first. It wasn't the second. That was the 3rd consecutive time. But why I was so saddened by that one was just the sheer lack of will and competitiveness it felt. It really felt that they laid down and died to that Carolina team. 3 points with that quarterback, the consistent offense that you had, the running backs that you had as well, and to see the offensive output that Super Bowl was between New England and Carolina. Why couldn't the Eagles do anything against that Carolina defense? That one drove me nuts for years. I remember just being hysterical as a young kid. My mom coming into my room, just trying to make sure I was okay. But that one just, it stung, man. I was just, the St. Louis one, the Kurt Warner story, it made a ton of sense, right? I mean, we look back on, they made a movie out of it for.
Well, it's the first run too. You never really get totally upset about the first.
Yeah, they were that first young team that got in there a little ahead of schedule. And then the next year against Tampa, that one stinks. They closed down the vet, right? That one, they blow it up, and then
that's probably the most popular one for Eagles fans that grew up in the 90s.
Absolutely.
Probably. Yeah.
And then the next year, the first year at Lincoln Financial Field, they do it all over again, Lou. And I mean, they laid down against.
Well, at that point, you feel like you're cursed. You're like, you did this 3 years in a row. It's like,
that's what I believed in curses fully until 2017.
No, absolutely. Gino, for me, it's another NFC title game. But again, I'm young. I was born in 1997. So the early, the Panthers lost, Tampa Bay. Again, I was an Eagles fan, but they don't resonate with me as much as the 2008 loss to the Cardinals do. And I know that one hit you as well. I remember to this day, and again, this ages me, I was at a bounce house party, but I had a kitchen table chair pulled up to the TV, and I was glued to that game because I never really experienced as a coherent Eagles fan a deep run like that yet. And they were so close. I mean, we know the story with like 6 minutes to go. Donovan Mcnabb hits Deshaun Jackson on a bomb. My favorite player on the team scores potentially the go-ahead touchdown to be a hero, right? Yeah, he bobbles it. It was just, I think he burned DRC too, who's such a fast corner in his own right. And we know that when he came to the Eagles in 2011, with the dream team, it was just everything was coming together. They were a 6 seed that just snuck in and, they beat the Vikings and the Giants. It was just an improbable run, and you were just riding this magic very similarly to 2018 in a way. And you just felt like it wasn't going to run out of magic. And then, of course, Larry Fitzgerald happens and Kevin Curtis, your favorite player. So it was really just my first taste of getting that deep into the postseason and really that first time where you could taste the Super Bowl, and it was uncharted waters. It felt so different than anything else I had felt. And then it just gets snatched away from you.
It's the last hurrah, right?
Yeah.
I just,
that too. Yeah.
I just got done watching on ESPN Plus, Unrivaled, the rivalry between Colorado Avalanche and the Detroit Red Wings in the NHL in the late 90s and early 2000s. And you look at that last year that Colorado won their last Stanley Cup before this most recent year when Ray Bourque was there and they traded him from Boston. And it was like, that was the last of that team that you would see for many years, and they wouldn't win for 20 plus years. That's what I felt about 08. It was like, when's the next time going to be? I don't think it's coming anytime soon.
Well, and you were right. It was 9 years.
9 years later, we waited almost
after that,
a decade
you lost.
After that.
You made the playoffs 3 more times. Yep, 2009, 2010, 2013, you lost in the wild card every year. And
that was the narrative. Howie wasn't a playoff winning general manager.
And Andy Reid lost his job. And 2010 was devastating for me, but not for most. I don't think there were really the 2008 expectations for 2009, 2010. 2013, Gino, even really you were just kind of playing house money with a bunch of backup quarterbacks at the time. Preseason expectations weren't there. For me, the 2010 team was my favorite of all time outside of 2017. So that one stings for me, but you're right. I mean, 2008 was that final, like Andy Reid, Donovan McNabb, Brian Dawkins era. Let's try to get that ring, and kind of ended the same way it did for the majority of that stint. What is, and this is again, maybe a weird question, but I feel like it makes sense. And I think most of our listeners will understand. What is a game that you came away and the Eagles lost, but you didn't feel like the 2003 NFC title against Carolina, where you felt like, okay, I can work with that, or I felt really good about this or that, the best loss, maybe in recent memory.
Yeah, I think
I got a few.
I think because for a while that curve, right, and those losses, none of them felt good because it was every time it's like. In 2010, when you lose 3 times to Dallas, you're like, how could this actually
back
be
to back in a row? You get blown out 2 weeks in a row at Jerry World to lose the division and then to get bounced. Yeah.
In the opening year of Jerry World as well. What a better way to celebrate it than beating your rivals twice in 2 consecutive weeks. So up until 2017, I thought every loss, like if we're going to put games out there that I hated, 2013 playoffs against the Saints. Disgusting.
Because it's the worst kind of loss, right? Like they drive all the way down the field and there's nothing you can do about it. They're in field goal range. It was kind of like the double doink, but they hit it.
It's when you're getting out of a car with all your groceries and you feel the bag snap. Yeah. There's nothing you could do at that point, and there goes all the eggs. That's what it was at the end of that game. I would say go a couple years later, same situation, same teams. The 2018 season, that game, I don't think it stings as bad as many other people think and believe that it does to them. I looked at it and said, that was the last bit of magic. It's like the last time you remember going to Disneyland.
Well, it was unexpected.
It's the lasting memory. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't expect to even make the playoffs. It was our first year hosting Locked On Eagles, so it was a great run. Yeah, it was kind of like celebrating that Nick Foles magic one last time. I mean, it sucked because you thought kind of like 2008, this isn't going to run out again. Oh my gosh, we might do this again, especially when you're up 14-0. So I remember at the time I was pretty beat up, but yeah, I get your point for sure. And you're coming off a Super Bowl win the year before. So,
and even the year after that with the Seattle game, take the Wentz hit in the Clowney situation out of it completely.
That's tough though, man. That devastated me.
The end of that game was pretty entertaining.
People forget, man, they were only down 8, but that's why it upsets me because Clowney's cheap. I don't want to swear. His style of play cost us a win. And who knows? You go to Green Bay the next week. Deshaun Jackson's healthy. Lane Johnson's healthy. I just, we all wanted to see Carson Wentz get that playoff success that never came. But yeah, for sure. So, Gino, one for me is actually 2019 as well, but it was week 2 in the regular season. The Sunday night battle against Atlanta, I really liked because everything, if you remember, Deshaun Jackson got hurt, I think, pre-game, right? Alshon Jeffery as well. Dallas Goedert too. In the second quarter, Carson Wentz was down to throw into Nelson Aguilar, who was not good in 2019, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and I don't know who was the third receiver at the time. I mean, it was Zach Ertz, and that's really it. Everything fell apart, and it was cool to see. And, Carson Wentz I love seeing a quarterback just put the team on your back, and, they take the lead, and then, of course, Jim Schwartz blows it against Julio Jones. But then Carson Wentz pulls off nearly another miracle. Nelly drops that go-ahead touchdown, but Wentz still wouldn't let them die. That 4th and long hurl to Aguilar, he catches it, and they fell short. But it was just a fun game. I came away. You're still 1-1. You're thinking, okay, get Djax and Alshon back. We know how it happened. That wasn't the case, but you came out of that game like, all right, Wentz looks like he's putting it together. And, of course, we know what happened now. But at the time, I felt good even in that loss.
I still don't enjoy that one. The Aguilar thing kills me, although we did get one of the greatest interviews in television history.
Right.
Because that
moment. That's right.
Unlike Aguilar. Everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Poor Nelly, man. He was a hero for 2 years, and the minute he drops a pass in Philly, and all that progress just gets pulled out from underneath
it all
him.
fell apart at that moment. I do like that one. I would look back and say the one in Detroit in 2016 as well. That was such a close game, and now
you're 3-0 with a rookie quarterback. Yeah,
it was a fun run while it lasted.
Moral victory.
We were ahead of schedule at that point, right, in Philadelphia. And looking back now, the guy that ended it for the Eagles, Darius Slay, is now a Philadelphia Eagle.
I remember Ryan Matthews
a glimpse of that because he didn't have it on the inside arm, and Kevin Curtis ran the route a yard short of the sticks in the 2008 NFC Championship game.
Yeah, Gino, one more too. 2020, the final week of the season, the tank game. I actually at the time was happy because it got you a higher pick and helped you get Devontae Smith. And at the time,
outrage to everybody in the world,
right? And that's what I love because I hate the stigma over tanking. I don't care. I don't want to win a meaningless game. So the whole integrity of the game thing drives me nuts. Also, it was great to see Joe Judge complain after because it bounced a 5-win Giants team. They were mad they didn't win the division. It's like maybe be less than 3 games under 500. So those parts were enjoyable. And at the time, I didn't think Doug Peterson was going to get fired. So it was just kind of cool to see them do that and get a higher pick, right? I think it was one of the few, silver linings of that season.
I agree. Made everybody outside of Philadelphia mad. It got the term "no one likes us, we don't care" going, and that was the chant in Philadelphia for many years. That
and helped them get Devontae. I don't regret it at all.
Not one bit, man. Not one bit. And that's why you have to look at this. When we were talking about the game with Seattle, where did that lead us to? The Jalen Hurts pick, right? You take players like that, and you take chances on guys like Carson Strong, because the quarterback position is where it all comes down to at the end of the day. All of these games we have talked about, the quarterback had a major factor to play in either outcome for either side. You look at 2008 with Kurt Warner versus Donovan Mcnabb. Kurt Warner outplayed Donovan Mcnabb in that game, whatever you want to say. Same with the NFC Championship when they played him. Same thing when they played Tampa. Same thing when they played Carolina. You have to make sure you take bets and take chances. And in those games that you lose, you learn lessons of where to improve. And I think looking at the last couple years, losing to teams like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year, who have an elite quarterback with elite playmakers, with an elite defense, That's the level you have to get to not talk about situations like this and
right.
refer back to games that you enjoy losing, which doesn't really go hand in hand.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Eagles. Everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. We've got one more show for you tomorrow, and then we're back to daily Monday through Friday next week as we are 2 weeks away from training camp at the NovaCare Complex in downtown Philadelphia. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get the show, free and available everywhere, and on YouTube as well in video form. Make sure as well you follow us on Twitter at LockedOnBirds, at DiBiase, and at GC24_football. Thanks so much for tuning in and making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL podcast, all the news across the league in under 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your shows. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Louie DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading, thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.